I'm Theo from the Climate Students, Sweden. We call ourselves Klimatstudenterna. And I'm here with Rosanna and Hanna, and we will present together our project called the Climate Action Ranking. And the Climate Action Ranking was, if I'm not mistaken, the first project of Climate Students, which initiated the whole movement. And therefore it's kind of the basis of the Climate Students movement. So this is kind of how it all started out. The ranking was an idea based on a frustration that the universities taught a lot about climate change, but they didn't follow their own teaching. So there was this idea that the Swedish universities have a unique role, both symbolic and practical, in the climate transition. And symbolically in that they represent like the future knowledge, and they present and research climate change, and practical because they can show like how transition is possible, and they educate the future stakeholders in society. So the Climate Students started up in Sweden in 2018, and in 2019 the Swedish government tightened the requirements for the higher education institutions to reduce their negative impact and to cut their direct emissions. And the same year, there was something called the Climate Framework that started from two universities in Sweden called the KTH and the Chalmers University. And they created this framework for other universities to sign if they wanted to agree upon reducing their direct emissions and in line with the Paris Agreement to reach the 1.5 degree target. But since this is kind of voluntary, there's no body that follows up this work, and no governmental body especially. So it can be, even though it's stated quite clearly, the goal, it can be quite vague in how to reach it. And it's voluntary if you want to sign up. But the idea was then that there are two things that motivate universities, and those are rankings and search pressures. So by making climate action visible to the public and to new students, we thought that the university could start to prioritize the climate action. And by doing a public ranking, this would force them to live up to their own targets that they signed, and make, I don't want to call it a public shaming, but public motivation to to follow their own goals. So climate action was thought of, when it started, it wasn't very clear that it was going to be a ranking or how it would look. It was more an idea of creating a competition and showing it publicly to evaluate and compare different universities. And first off, the Climate Students had a meeting with the Environmental Protection Agency, which is a governmental body in Sweden, to see what kind of data that the universities provided to the Environmental Protection Agency and what was lacking. And we found out that there was a lot of data lacking because it's not regulated, and it's not, the universities are by law not forced to send in all of their data. So the lack of data is that universities can kind of choose what they want to send in and what they want to make public. And this makes it very, very hard for anyone to compare different universities and their emissions and to create an evaluation. So there was first an idea of, okay, if this is the case, how can we compare them? Maybe we could have a jury, which would be based on different scientists and researchers and perhaps students that would go through the university's websites and their emissions that they reported to the Environmental Protection Agency, and compare these with their set goals and make a listing out of these and set kind of scores for how well they responded and how well they performed. But it was quickly realized that this would be a lot of work, like way too much work to be like practically possible to do. So in order to make it like less work for the organization, and also to make the universities more of a active participant it was decided to make a survey instead. And by making a survey, we could send out the survey to all the universities, and they could choose what they wanted to present, and therefore they couldn't also complain afterwards that we misjudged the data because they sent in the data to us. And we could summarize these and create a kind of ranking based on different criteria to present to the public. But this has been a journey, yeah. So I believe Hanna.
Yes. So since the ranking was started, it has developed a lot. And as you can see on the pictures, the graphic has changed, but also, of course, parts of the method. And it's particularly the difference between the method 2021 and this year's method that has been the largest or biggest difference. And it has been because the project group have had much contact with the universities and higher education institutions, but also researchers at the universities to get advice on how we could design the best possible ranking. But the major change in the method was that one of the main categories was replaced by another. Could you change slide? Thank you. So in previous years, the ranking was covered by 4 categories, and this was CO2 emissions per annual employee, decrease in CO2 emissions the last year per annual employee, ambition, climate goals and action plans, but also best measurement of total emissions. But after the change this year, the last category was replaced by goal achievement. And this was to encourage the universities to not only set ambitious goals, but actually follow them up and present good goal achievement. And as Theo said, the ranking is based on a survey, and how the ranking is done in short is that the project group works out a method that includes making a questionnaire and a scoring system. And when the scoring system and the questionnaire is designed, the questionnaire is sent out to the universities. And when we have received the responses, we use the responses from the questionnaire together with the scoring method to rank the universities. And alongside this, we also write a report of the work to strengthen the credibility of the ranking, and so everyone can follow how we did it. And when all the universities are ranked, we have the results. We make a graphic and complete the report, and then we publish it and also make a press release to try to get it out in the media, but also in student magazines. So the reason why we do not go into so much detail about our method is because it's constantly developing and it's not a perfect method. There are always areas that could be improved, but however, we think it's a really good project, and some reasons why we think this is and why you should consider making a ranking is because universities want good public relations, and a ranking, we believe a ranking is a good way to give the universities incentive to perform better in their climate work. And it's also a concrete way to show them important areas within their climate work. And we also think it's a good way to put pressure on the universities that they should measure their emissions and have goals and action plans for this. And also one more point is that it's a really educational project, and it's a great opportunity to network both with universities, but also researchers and other parts involved in the project.
But you still have to, hi, I'm Rosanna, by the way. When making the ranking, there are some things you have to consider since it's a pretty long process. And the first thing is to have a plan from the beginning, pretty like long-term plan from when are the most intense periods and when can you relax a little bit, as well as to make the survey shorter and more purposeful for scoring, because it depends on who the university picks to fill out the survey, but it has to be easily understandable and the right person has to answer. And we would rather go for quality rather than quantity. So if you make it shorter, then they can give more explained responses and etc. And also to make the emissions criteria based on what is feasible to emit, because there are some who choose net zero and some who choose zero, and there are always circumstances around different goal settings. So make some emissions criteria based on what is feasible, because not all of them are going to be able to change, like energy sources, etc. So look at what is already around and try to base it on that, as well as make a communications plan, because when going out with a press release and posting on different media sources, it is not going to be just to post it. You need to make sure that you know who to send it to, have email lists and such. So planning is really at the root of a project like this, especially since you're in contact with governmental bodies and other important actors, which might, and planning gives you a better sort of relation to them and makes you look better, essentially. And also take policies into account, not only national ones, but the ones that are at the specific universities too. What do they have to refer themselves to and what are their rules, to make sure that it is a fair evaluation. And make the final report more detailed, just to show that you have made a sincere and proper ranking, and not something that is vague, since the climate movement often is criticized for being vague, or more of a movement that is about changing but not about changing into something specific. So make sure that you have a detailed report on specific solutions, because it's very appreciated and it helps universities and other bigger actors to know how to change and what to change, like concrete goals. Flight emissions, for example, are something very concrete. And also give them a lot of time to answer the survey, not just because they might be busy, so to say, but you have to make sure that the right person answers the survey. If they just assign someone who doesn't have sustainability knowledge or doesn't have any insight into the plans, then you might end up with a worse and less credible result. So give a lot of time to answer the survey and be clear about what you want. And lastly, rank investments, because universities, as any actor really, make investments, and usually they're not as public as many other actions they might take, and they're very important for what like future development of not just the universities, but the things they choose to support, so to say. So try to find like hidden emissions that might be more indirect than direct. And also, just to give a bit of a precaution, it's pretty difficult to create a trustworthy ranking, since many people measure in different ways. The term sustainability is very vague and broad as it is, so make sure that you have maybe a proper definition or be clear in your language, and try to be as specific in your sources and everything as you possibly can. And excuse our language, but you will receive a lot of shit from universities. Some of them will not be happy with how they were ranked, and some might not take you seriously because you're students. So be prepared to receive some backlash, but backlash is good too. That means that you've made an impact in some way, to a certain degree at least. And try to get feedback from researchers and other stakeholders within the sustainability movement when establishing the method, just to make sure that you choose some sort of, I don't know what you would call that, you choose something that is actually possible to measure, for example, and that you measure it in a way that is accurate, because just you know that they know more than you do, and show that you have taken support from these and that you have scientific background and scientific support for the ranking, as it'll make not only the universities want to cooperate with you more, but it also makes the ranking way more credible. And try to get support from different departments, like governmental departments, when creating the surveys. For example, we used help from the Environmental Protection Agency, and that also gives your ranking way more credibility than if it is a smaller cooperation score, so to say. So that was our ranking. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions or you want to know more about how to make one, like Hannah said, it's we didn't go much into detail about the method, but if you want to know something, then you have our email address here. And yeah, thank you so much for listening.